The following episode is dedicated to the memory of Daria Nicolodi.
Hi, this is Maria Olson. You may know me from Trophy Heads or Starry Eyes and maybe Paranormal Activity 3. And I want to welcome you to Anthony T's Horror Show because it's an awesome show.
Hi, my name is Jessica Cameron, and you're listening to Anthony T's Horror Show.
Hey, fellow horror fans. This is Troy Escamilla, the director of Party Night and Mrs. Claus, and you are listening to Anthony T's Horror Show. Enjoy.
Welcome to another edition of Anthony T's Horror Show. I'm Anthony T. In this edition, I will be talking about the late Daria Nicolodi, who sadly passed away between episodes. For those who don't know, she's an Italian horror actress, and she was the co-writer of Dario Argento's Suspiria. Then I'll have a roundtable interview with director Brian Barsuglia, actors Jed Rowen, Kasey Brown, and actress Tasha Tacosa, as we're going to talk about their latest film, Social Distance, which is currently available on DVD and Blu-ray. And in What's Anthony T Watching, I will be talking about a film that I've been wanting to see for over a year now, and it recently came out on DVD. But first, I have to get to the biggest news story that's been out there between episodes. Before I go into it, however, I just want to let you know that this is going to be more of a commentary. So that means all the views expressed here in this segment are the views of mine and mine only, and not of Dark Discussions Network. This deals with Warner Brothers putting its entire 2021 release slate in theaters and HBOMAX. Now, I'm going to tell you why this is such a very bad idea on Warner Brothers' part. First, theaters are already struggling because of the pandemic and everything. By throwing your entire release slate on your streaming platform, it's not good. It is really not a good move. I know HBO and Warner Bros. Are really trying hard to really push their new streaming service, but what they are doing is going to be at the expense of the theaters once this whole pandemic blows over. Because seriously, if you're going to throw your entire release slate, including big films such as Matrix 4, The Conjuring 3, and Godzilla vs. Kong on your streaming service, you are going to kill the theaters. These theaters will need these big movies once they reopen, once everything is back to somewhat normal. And to throw all these major films on your streaming platform in theaters is such a bad idea, because why go to the movie theater when you can just pay $15 or subscribe to HBO on cable like I do and get HBO Max for free? It gives me no motivation to go out to the theater and see these films. The point of these big budget tentpole films is to have them seen in a big theater with a big audience. Meaning if you have to delay the film another 4 or 5 months, you delay the film 4 or 5 months. Because these are major films. I can understand maybe putting the first half of 2021 on HBO Max. Because right now, it doesn't look good. But to throw the entire year and just wave the white flag that theaters are going to all go under without any effort to bringing these theaters back after the pandemic is ludicrous. It is a sign that Hollywood is trying to get rid of the movie theaters and physical media. I want both of those ways to see a film stay after everything blows over. But to be mindless and throw the entire release slate on a streaming service just so you can get that streaming service to have big numbers is ridiculous. Movies are meant to be seen in a theater, not on a TV screen. It's okay to see some films on a TV screen. I do that a lot with all the Blu-rays and DVDs. But I do not like the idea of everything going just digital. And I know that putting these movies out for 30 days, then taking them off. But still, damage done. Because no one's going to be motivated to go see any Warner Brothers film in the theaters after this pandemic is over. Because why go out and go to a theater when it's right in the front of your living room? It is ridiculous that they will put films such as Godzilla vs. Kong, The Conjuring 3, and The Matrix 4, and Dune, we can add Dune to the list as well, on virtually on a streaming service for one price a month. You pay $15 a month, oh, you get to see one, maybe two films from Warner Brothers. How do you do that? That's ridiculous. What they should have done, maybe you put your lesser budgeted films in the first half of the year, then the second half, say June, July, August, start rolling out all these big films once everything starts to return to normal. Because personally, theaters need to survive. And what Warner Brothers is doing is trying to kill the theaters once this pandemic ends. And that is ridiculous. All so they can have great numbers for HBOMAX. And HBOMAX, let's talk about HBOMAX. As of this recording, they are not on Roku. Meaning you cannot see HBOMAX on Roku, which is probably the most popular streaming device out there. Are you trying to get Roku to bite and give in? Because that's the only thing I can think of why HBO Max is doing this. Because they want to get on Roku on their own terms. And they are willing to sacrifice their release slate for that. And one more thing to think about. If you're an executive at WB, what are you thinking? Because a lot of these movies are probably going to lose money. And especially when you're rolling out $200 million films onto a streaming service, it may be very hard to recoup $200 million. Because, seriously, nobody's going to want to go to the theater if they subscribe to HBO Max. I'm surprised they did not go the premium VOD route here. Because at least that would have made this company money. By going through HBO Max, I don't know if it's going to help the films recoup their budgets. Because it looks like they're writing off a ton of money. But it's your business, Warner Brothers. And you also got to think about this thing about HBO Max. If you are a subscriber to HBO on cable, you get HBO Max for free. Here's why that is not beneficial for Warner Brothers. Because on HBO Max, you do not get any live streams of HBO or Cinemax. If you subscribe to HBO Max for $14.99 a month. And quite frankly, I don't even know why HBO Max did not include live streams of HBO and Cinemax. Because, quite frankly, you're already paying for HBO. Let's face it, if you're on cable still. And now you're getting HBO Max for free. Meaning, you're already a subscriber if you have a account online with your cable company. That is ridiculous. And I don't see how that makes a penny for Godzilla vs. Kong when someone who subscribes to HBO on cable can literally see Godzilla vs. Kong for free. That's the problem I have with this whole thing with WB dumping their 2021 release slate to HBO Max and theaters. I can see this right now, that these $200 million movies will struggle to make a profit. And that is not good if you're running a business. You're really gambling that everybody's going to subscribe to HBO Max. And seriously, I think this is a bad move for Warner Brothers because of that simple reason. It'll kill theaters, and it may hurt the company as well, because you're literally throwing big budgeted films onto HBO Max. And especially if you have cable already, you're seeing it for free. And that should be great for me, but it's not great for the theaters. And quite frankly, stuff like that will get the theaters out of business quickly. That is the reason why I'm very opposed to this. Sure, I'll probably see them all on HBO Max, but I have no motivation now to see a film from Warner Brothers in theaters once everything returns to normal. Because why should I go to the theaters now since I have HBO Max and I can see it on HBO Max? Really, Warner Brothers, are you trying to put the theaters out of business? They're already struggling enough, but once everything returns to normal, they need the money badly. And Warner Brothers is trying to get rid of these theaters. That's what I think. And it's very sad. It is very sad. Tent-pole movies are meant to be seen in a theater, not on a television. And Warner Brothers, by putting these big movies basically for one low price, you are killing the theaters. And that is really sad. What's next? Disney gonna throw all their films to Disney Plus now? Because you know somebody's gonna respond. Either Disney's gonna start throwing all their 2021 films to Disney Plus, or maybe Universal Pictures throws all their films to Peacock, the new NBC app, which is owned by Universal. This is ridiculous. Seriously. They are trying to kill the movie theaters. These big budgeted studios are trying to kill the movie theaters. Because I could see Disney making a move now to put everything on Disney Plus. Same as Universal putting everything on Peacock. This is ridiculous. Forget the premium VOD window, as I can see this turning into a major streaming war. And using big budget titles is not good. It's gonna kill theaters. Let's face it. WB may have started the process of the death of the movie theater with this. I can't fathom these stupid ideas that Hollywood makes every time. I don't get it. Whether it's on production side or business side. It's like they want to keep everything in-house. We don't want to share profits with anybody. It's ridiculous. This is a dumb idea. I hope it backfires, because the movie theaters need to survive after this pandemic. Rant over.
Welcome to Dark Discussions, your place for the discussion of horror film, fiction, and all that's fantastic. A weekly podcast where the discussion is about the most recent horror and genre films. Intelligent talk on a genre that deserves intelligence. A conversation between co-hosts discussing not only the films, but also the connotation that the directors and screenwriters are trying to articulate. When you want more than a review, listen to Dark Discussions.
And speaking of perception, there's just one more scene I want to talk about, which is after Caleb discovers that Kyoto's a robot. Kyoto kind of peels off her skin, showing him what's underneath.
Now, wait a minute. I know where you're going with this, but tell me you weren't already thinking this 15 minutes earlier in the film. Exactly what he's thinking at that moment.
Which is he's a robot too.
Oh, I considered the possibility.
Right, and that's what I like, is the fact that the writers were smart enough to know that this is what the audience would be thinking.
We've all seen Blade Runner.
Right, exactly.
www.darkdiscussions.com, wherever podcasts are found.
Welcome back. I hate to talk about sad news, but between episodes, we lost a great actress in the horror genre. Now, a lot of people might not know this actress because a lot of you horror fans are into more of the mainstream stuff, more of the classic horror film stuff. But me, I'm also a major fan of the Italian horror film genre, as there's like a lot of very good directors that came out of that genre, including Dario Argento, Lucio Fulci, Mario Bava, to name a few. Sadly, between episodes, we lost, I think, one of the greatest Italian horror actresses to ever be on screen. I'm talking about the late Daria Nicolodi. Now, she's an actress who's been in a lot of major Italian horror films. Now, before I get into it, she was also the ex-boyfriend of legendary horror director Dario Argento. She's also the mother of actress Asia Argento, who's been in such films as Triple X and George Romero's Land of the Dead. Daria Nicolodi has appeared in such Italian classics as Inferno, Deep Red, Delirium, to name a few. But my favorite Daria Nicolodi role was in the 1982 film Tenebrae, where she played Anne, an assistant to Anthony Franciosa's character in the film. She also got to star with the late Donald Pleasance in a very underrated Italian horror film, in my opinion, called Paganini Horror. It's a very weird film, but I really enjoyed the film a lot, including her performance in that film. She also co-wrote the screenplay for Dario Argento's classic horror film Suspiria, along with the screenplay for Paganini Horror. She's definitely a very talented actress that will be missed, and really was one of the first Italian horror actresses that I was a fan of. As I started my journey into Italian horror films with Dario Argento films, and is one of the main reasons why I'm a major Italian horror film fan today. It is sad that we lost another great actress, as Daria Nicolodi was a great talent that will be missed, as she sadly passed away at the age of 70. Now at this time I want to offer my condolences to Daria Nicolodi's friends and family. Every day there's a family struggling with hospital bills to care for their sick child who is fighting an illness. There's a woman who is fighting breast cancer and is having trouble making ends meet while paying for their treatment. And there are burn victims that are going through treatments to heal their deep wounds. There is a charity in the horror community that helps these people. Scares That Care is an organization that helps families deal with the bills for their child. They help women get the treatment they need to fight breast cancer, and they help people who are dealing with severe burns get the help they need to heal. Scares That Care is a 100% volunteer organization, and 501c3 nonprofit charity that is dedicated to helping these people in fighting real monsters. To find out more information or to donate to Scares That Care, you can go to www.scaresthatcare.org. Every donation helps Scares That Care fight real monsters.
Hey guys, this is Steve and Christina. I'm the founder, owner, creator, and host of Super Retro Throwback Reviews. Are you looking for the best movie reviews, music reviews, video game reviews, and Comic-Con coverage all around? Well then look no further. Definitely check out Super Retro Throwback Reviews on YouTube and our new audio podcast, the new and improved Super Retro Throwback Reviews audio files version 2.0 on the following media distributors: Podbean, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, iTunes, and Spotify.
Class is over, John. Time for something new and improved.
Before I get to this social distance interview, I want to apologize to actor Jed Rowen as I accidentally botched his name a couple of times during the interview. With that, I do sincerely apologize. Now here's the interview, and I'll be back with What's Anthony T watching on the other side. Welcome back to Anthony T's Horror Show. I'm here with Brian Barsuglia, the writer and director of the new film Social Distance. I'm here also with actress Tasha Tacosa and actors Kasey Brown and Jed Rowen. How is everyone doing today?
Great.
Doing well. Fantastic.
We are here to talk about the new film Social Distance, which is available on Blu-ray and DVD. Tell everyone about the film.
Well, it's a movie that really reflects what we're going through right now. It's about a group of people trying to restore the image of their cruise line that's being blamed for bringing COVID into the United States. And over the course of the story, things start to unravel.
Ted, Tasha, and Kasey, tell everyone about your characters in the film.
It's Jed, by the way, not Ted.
I said Ted. Oh my!
Get a little.
I thought.
Well,
I hate spell check. I really do on Amazon Fire.
Everyone gets it wrong. You know, when I put orders in for food, I just give them like a fake name because they never get it right. So don't worry. Well, you know, the film was born in the early days of the pandemic, which we're still in the early days, I guess. But my character's really just kind of like a kook. He's just kind of out there on the fringes of society, you know, with all sorts of weird theories about things, and has read too much and kind of knows too much, but has to have this day job, you know, so he has to be in this kind of mainstream world, you know, so it's kind of an interesting character.
Yeah, my character's name is Alexis Morales. She's the social media manager of the company. However, her dream reality is to be a social media influencer, which is her pseudonym Lexi Moran. So basically she's an office girl who has great aspirations of being way more fabulous than she is. So kind of in there as like an antagonist to, you know, do her day job, but really she's glowing up to insanity to become Lexi Moran when the world ends. That's how she is. And so everything she does is overly fabulous and too dramatic, and just she's in that moment.
My character's name is Nick Thomas. He basically gets brought back into the fold of Dreamscape Cruise Lines. He's trying to find his way back in everyone's good graces, while at the same time everything's going on and he's battling all his demons. So,
Brian, how did this idea and story come about?
I think it came about with a conversation between Jed and I. Back in the early days of quarantine, when things shut down, Jed and I were looking for a way to keep busy, and we were on the phone or chatting on Messenger or something, and I sort of just started to develop that way, and I said, hey, let's turn this into a movie. I mean, but that was, you know, probably March 20th, and right after things shut down, and I thought we were just going to be out for 2 or 3 weeks, and I'm like, let's do this quick. And that's kind of how it developed.
It really helped during that shutdown, because it was something to do. It was something to just kind of throw yourself into. Thank God.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the film deals with issues like conspiracy theories, addictions, social media, online privacy, and COVID-19, some of which is currently in the headlines now. What made you want to play out those angles in your story, Brian?
Well, it kind of started with the first act of the story. We built the first act around the actors and the characters in there, And then I just sort of wanted to see where the actors were taking the characters and build it off of that. And there were a lot of things in the news at the time. It wasn't, the headlines weren't quite as big back in April when we started this, though. So it seemed, as I've kind of mentioned a few times in various places, it seemed pretty far-fetched when we were initially doing it. And I look at it now, and it seems a little more of a reflection of what's outside than I could have ever imagined.
Brian, just say it. You're a visionary. Just say it.
Jeb, what made you want to work with Brian?
Well, I've worked, I've worked with Brian for a long time. I mean, I got, back in the mid to late 2000s, I did a movie called Zombie Farm with Brian, and I auditioned for the character of inbred Jed, and I famously, sent him an 8x10 headshot when people still had those, with a little yellow sticker, stick on that said, "Hey, I'm a Jed too. I'd love to have this role." And then it happened, and kept in touch ever since, and done all these great projects with Brian. He's just such a great director, and he really gets his films out there. So happy to keep the collaboration going.
Tasha and Kasey, what drew you to his screenplay, given the fact that the material deals with current events?
I'll answer first. I'll go. I worked with Brian before at Impact Event. I like the way he writes. When he came, actually hit me on Facebook, because none of us could be social, and asked me if I'd be interested in what he was trying to do. I was like, yes, because I'm sitting in a room doing nothing, staring at the wall and Instagram. And I just like the idea of reflecting what's happening right now. I think each of the characters, when I watch the film, each of them shows a point of view of somebody trying to make it through not being able to contact anyone, be face to face. I mean, my character is social, and so she's going crazy because she can't contact. I just like the idea of us representing so many people who are going through this, who didn't know exactly how to shift into this new reality that we're in right now. And I think that's fun to look at. I'm glad that we did it in the moment, because I think a lot of people connect with it,
Yeah, I thought it was a good opportunity. The way it was, how should I word this? It wasn't a full script from the beginning, so we had a lot of room to grow with it, which I thought was conceptually cool.
How much of the script did you guys originally get?
None of it. I think originally we kind of met individually. I told him about my idea, talked about resources and the kind of character each person wanted to play, and then I had kind of broad strokes outlined, and then I really built it to the individual actors and the resources. And then I wrote the first act to see how that went. We shot the first act, and once that was pieced together, I wrote the rest of it and doled it out to them scene by scene, I think, rather than act by act, rather than giving it to them all at the same time. So it was kind of a unique process, I think, for the actors, is they didn't have a full script to see the outcome of their character initially while we were shooting it.
How much of this film wasn't scripted?
I think it was mostly, all the conversational scenes were scripted. Then there were the scenes where you see the characters on screen by themselves. Some of that was maybe a little bit unscripted, but guided for the most part. Tasha, you did some stuff with your character, and I don't know, did you wing that, or was that scripted? I gave you writing credits in there, because you definitely did some pretty big chunks that I didn't write.
Part of it was through the guidance of Alexis Morales' character, because she was the social media manager, so she was putting out information how to, not do this or that during this time frame. And then the Alexi Moran, it was just more of how I envisioned she would try to translate that as an influencer, and more of kind of her, can't even think of a word right now, her reaction to what's going on. So that part was less scripted, but more going with Brian's guidelines of where the character was going towards the end.
I think mine was totally scripted, right, Brian? I think I just remember, 100% what was in the script.
Most of mine was, but I would send you stuff kind of regularly, just out of boredom, just to throw stuff at the wall, and just to see if hey, is this any good? And then you're like, I like this, or okay, we'll use this, but we'll tweak it. But I had a lot of fun just doing that too.
Yeah, there was a lot of the stuff that you said. And you and Tasha both sent me a lot of additional stuff that there just wasn't time to put into the finished product either. But it gave me a lot of options.
What was the audition process like, if there was one?
It was more me asking people to be involved. Didn't really do much of an audition process in the traditional way. It was reaching out to the individual actors and asking them to be involved and then shaping the character with them. As we mentioned, it wasn't a complete script from the start. It was a skeleton of an idea where I wanted to take it. And then, so I mean, there weren't auditions. It was reaching out and being familiar with most of the actors. I really knew what they were capable of. I hadn't worked with Kasey directly before, so we did a lot of extra work, I think, in the beginning, so I could kind of get to know him and his style. And as he mentioned, he sent me a lot of stuff so I could play around and tweak it and develop it that way.
Brian, how were you able to find Sheen and Christina McGee, as they are the only actors in the film that are together in the same block for most of their time in the film?
I've known Christine for a while and her husband Sean as well. I've worked with her previously, but not him. So I reached out to them and asked if they would like to be involved. And similarly, they were looking for something to do and a way to keep busy, and the rest of the industry had shut down, so we were able to make a movie from home.
And were you lucky that you found a couple of actors that were living together for this film?
Yeah, it helped develop the script. They actually did some really fun stuff where they wrote entire biographies about their individual characters. So before I finished writing the script, they had written biographies about who their characters were, where they came from, how they met. So they had this backstory that they created, and then once I had that, I pulled that into the script too.
Did everyone get time to hang out with each other before the film on Zoom or
Once.
Skype?
We did a read-through of the first act together. So we'd had one read-through where people kind of got to know each other's rhythms and be a little bit familiar with each other. But more or less it was them going off my timing and me working with them on their timing, because every scene was shot individually. Every little piece of it was shot individually and then pieced together in post.
Jed, Tasha, and Kasey, did each of you had to film your roles separately, or were you together in some of the scenes where the group meetings were happening?
Can I answer that, guys? All did it separately, and what kind of amazed me when I finally saw like a rough cut of the scenes in the project was, the chemistry between the cast. It was like we were like a theater company where we had been rehearsing together for months. And I'm not exaggerating really. It was kind of for us all to be isolated and to pretend, which is our job as actors, but to pretend that we are having a dialogue with the other actor or actors. It's kind of mind-boggling how well the chemistry between the actors worked. It's unbelievable.
Was it hard filming your scenes even though you had no interaction with each other?
A little bit, I think, because although it did come together and we did have chemistry to what you might think the other person's reacting off of, we have to directly go off of Brian. So it's like creating in that process, but also just hoping that you're reacting to the right area on screen. It was a little bit challenging, but I feel it got well.
Yeah, I thought it was just a really cool experience doing it this way. It was definitely different, but it was equally as fun.
Yeah, and for Kasey at times probably a little more challenging because we had some technical issues there. So
just say I suck at Zoom. Just say I suck at it. I'm no good at
it. We'll leave it at that.
One of the most impactful scenes in the film was when everyone except...
Wait, hang on. Wait. This is a spoiler here.
Spoiler, yep.
He's going to spoil the
spoiler
scene.
alert.
I'm going to spoil a scene. What was it like in the film to film the scene where the captain killed himself and the blood splattering all over the screen, as it really gets me every time as I've seen this film twice?
Well, as the actors, I'll let you take that one.
Jed, Kasey?
I think for me it was trying to give an honest, believable reaction to something I'm not really seeing. That's just not there. I'm reacting to my phone. There's nothing there, and I want to portray something that's honest. about this, and he's scared of what's going on. But I'm just not really having nothing to react to makes it a little more difficult.
You know, you in that scene, I think you just, you know, I just think it's one of those scenes where you just wanted to be really focused and dig deep for a really genuine emotional reaction, but at the same time not be too over the top, and you had to find that sweet spot. So, but I think the end result, I think this scene really worked. You know.
Yeah, it's probably the most impactful scene in the whole film.
Mm-hmm.
As like I said, seen it twice, and it still is impactful.
That's great to hear.
And for the actors, I think you could really equate it to green screen acting. They were acting by themselves and had no idea what that finished product was even going to look like. The captain, he actually had the advantage over the rest of them because the rest of the scene was already edited and shot, so we could get his timing perfect and in one take throughout there. So he actually had the finished product to respond to and act with, where everyone else, it was one piece at a time.
How long did each scene take to film?
Well, you know, I think it varied. You know, sometimes you'd really hit it well, and then other times, you know, at least I'm speaking for myself, you know, you might, it might take a few times. So it kind of depended for me. I had big chunks of dialogue. So sometimes monologues and stuff. So it you know, you remember, Brian, sometimes it would be I hit it out of the park the first time, and other times it would, you know, other takes would be I'd have some problems with it.
What was the experience like performing on a Zoom chat compared to performing on a film set?
Well, we didn't record on a Zoom chat. They had individual cameras set up. So I directed via Zoom, but they weren't actually. The movie wasn't actually recorded that way. It was recorded with individual cameras.
Ah, okay. Did not know that. Because I got the impression with Zoom because of all the other blocks going at once.
But that's actually kind of a compliment. You know?
that was the goal, so that's perfect.
Yeah, the whole point was to make it as organic as possible. So if you thought it was a real life Zoom thing, that's kind of cool.
I was on a cell phone.
What was the challenges performing, whether on a cell phone or a camera, by yourself?
Lighting.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
My God, that was my biggest nightmare. I'm not great at it, and it was like, that was so hard. Like, that was the worst.
Brian got me this multicolored light bulb that I could change all the different colors, like a little toy I have.
Oh,
so I had the bright green the whole time rocking, you know.
I'd say, yeah, it was either lighting or a lot of the times I would feel like I was getting a good take in, and then outside all of a sudden dogs or sirens or some other shit, and I was just like, well, okay, there goes that one.
Oh, I got so many dogs around me in this place I'm at. It's amazing. I got some clean takes.
Yeah, one of my scenes that I shot outside, so that was interesting. But I think the outside sound kind of worked with it.
Yeah, I think we ended up really incorporating it into that one. There was only one section of the movie we had to reshoot because of the Rachel Riley did a scene where it was just the outside sound was just too abusive to what we were doing, so we had to reshoot one section.
Jed and Kasey.
Uh-oh.
How deep did you have to go into your performances, as both of you had complex characters to play with in the film?
Kasey, you want to go first?
Sure. I tried going as deep as I could. I really wanted to grasp and be true to people who are experiencing addiction and who are battling through that. I think you can see it briefly for a second. I think you added in where I'm actually like crying. I spent a night like doing that whole thing, and for me that's digging deep. Like I'm not like one to cry my eyes out, but I was like I'm willing to do that for this character because I think it felt real.
Yeah, I that's a good question, Anthony. I dug like really really deep into the character, and I wasn't doing the getting emotional with the crying, but just the intensity and the I really figured out different layers of it, and sometimes I even thought I was too intense. And I think it just had a lot to do with the seclusion that we were all living under, and how you could just you'd be alone in where you're living, or you're walking around. I would spend a lot of time walking around the streets at night practicing my lines, and because you were secluded and alone, just it really kind of allowed you to get really deep into the character. And that might have been one of the reasons why the cast in general, performed so well, maybe.
Tasha, you play a social media influencer in the film. Did you do any research into various social media influencers? As I thought you pulled off the role very well. And what was it like trying to balance your character and this social media influencer in the film?
Well, thank you. Actually, being in quarantine, I spent a lot of time on... but in researching it, I've just become enthralled at how important that influencer is, like how many people really watch them and pay attention to them or influenced by them, literally. And so I somehow found that really entertaining to create. So I tried to create a version of what you might see, but somebody with Lexi, who's more, or Alexis, is more of a normal person trying to do it. So she's just all out there all over the place just trying to create it. So I found it was an exciting balance to do it, because here I am starting off as just this regular girl who works in social media, and then she wants to be this, and I feel like she's doing the broad strokes of it, of becoming this influencer. And so it's coming out odd and awkward, but it somehow comes together. And I had a good time playing both sides of it, because like a normal person versus this crazy artistic person, it was just exciting to play that level of character. I mean, my biggest challenges was trying to dress them differently and trying to give them, different attitudes. But I felt it was just kind of a fun transition. And I did a lot of research. Recently, I've also been sucked into TikTok, where there are a lot of influencers on there, and just these people who are so much trying to connect with each other. So I hope that I kind of represented Lexi and Alexis like that, where they're trying to connect, and the influencing is part of it, but it's just, that's their way of socializing. That's their way of getting there. And so I hope I answered your question.
What was the most difficult scene to film for each of you?
I'm going to say mine was, I think, the first few scenes, as it went along, I felt like I was getting more and more into the character. Early on, where we didn't necessarily have a direction, I tend to want to, initially always want to give the same sarcastic, assholey type feel to a lot of my characters, and that's where I kind of started, and I felt as we went, the character definitely progressed. I had a really bulky, kind of multi-page scene with a lot of emotional ups and downs, and I went really, really intense with it, and I thought I was going to have a heart attack at the end. But you remember that scene, Brian? I forget it. It was like a 4 or 5 page scene filled with monologues. And,
there's a
time. Was working on it constantly, and finally it was really like emotionally pretty draining.
I think I agree with Kasey. I think it was the beginning, because we got the script in sections. So the beginning was a little bit more challenging, just figuring out what's going on in your characters' heads, because as much as we can plan for it, it's evolving in the real time. So that took a moment to kind of fall into like, where's she going? And then towards the end, I was like, light this on fire. Let's do this.
Brian, what gave you the idea to give your cast the script in sections?
Oh, I really wanted them to be able to contribute to their character. Like I said, I had the broad strokes outlined. I knew kind of where the story was going to go, but I wanted to see how they developed the characters first. So I think I wrote the first act after I talked to everybody, and then I wrote the second act, and then the characters were pretty well developed, and from there, I think I wrote the last chunk of the screenplay. So I think I wrote it really like in 3 parts.
It was like the script writing really began when Brian decided to actually do the movie, and he started doing all the pre-production right when he was starting to write. So it wasn't like a traditional project where the script's already been done, and by the time you shoot, you have passing out all this completed scripts to everybody.
Brian, what was it like trying to piece the film together?
Complicated. It was very, very complicated, and took had a lot of time during quarantine to be able to do that. Luckily, but it may not look like it. It's an effects-heavy movie. Every scene is an effect. There isn't anything in this movie that isn't a visual effect. While it may have been shot on phones or DSLR cameras or more cinema-style cameras, they were all brought together to create one overall look, and then there were a lot of things that were developed through it, from all the websites that you see to all the shells that are supposed to be computers. All of that was created and manipulated, so it was pretty complicated from start to finish.
Would each of you do a film like this again?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really fun to do. It's always fun to do movies, different ways, and as technology changes, you guys remember when green screens start to emerge, you had to use your imagination more. And now this is a whole other way of doing movies. So as the technology changes or the circumstances changes, it's fun to do movies in different ways. And this was really fun.
And as artists, I think we all enjoy the collaborative effort. And some projects you're in, they're very structured. And this one, really, we did collaborate with Brian, which made it more fun and just another opportunity to kind of spread our artistic wings.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. What are each of your upcoming projects? Let's start with Brian.
Working on one right now called The Electric Man with Jed here. And it's a project that was birthed from quarantine. I'm not going to give the story away, but again, this came from something that happened in quarantine, specifically to Jed, and I said, I'm going to write a screenplay. And from there, developed this project called The Electric Man, and we are shooting it now. It's kind of a crazy sci-fi, drama, comedy, horror, romantic comedy, philosophy movie combined with zombies and vampires and time travel.
Brian, you forgot bowling.
I forgot what?
Bowling.
Oh, yeah, and bowling. Yes, that's a huge part of the movie.
I shot another film over quarantine, this time frame, called American Bigfoot. And I play a washed-up C-list celebrity. It's fabulous. And, yeah, up in Big Bear. And actually, Vernon is also in that film, too. And I've never met him, so this is how we filmed it.
I was actually in Vegas briefly early on in quarantine. Had a small role in a film called Bloodthirst coming out next year at some point. That's by the Mahals. I did another film with them called Bridge of the Doomed. So, yeah, those should be coming out early next year, I believe. And then we'll be working, I think, together on whenever Brian wants to do Amber Road, I think, next year, hopefully.
Yeah. At some point, we'll just kind of waiting to see how this all plays out with the pandemic world here. It's a different kind of project, and want to make sure it's clear and safe and sane to be able to shoot it the way I want to.
Yeah, and I'm just doing the Electric Man, with Brian. So it's going to be another great role. The script is great. So lucky to be doing another project with Brian.
Now, before I go, what special features can you find on the DVD and Blu-ray release of Social Distance?
There's a kind of a behind the scenes that shows what we were doing, people in front of their computers, the cameras going, and the way we interacted, and shows you some highlights of how this was put together, what it looked like when we were shooting it compared to the finished product. So really just a behind the scenes that gives some insight into it.
Where can they find each of you on social media?
Jed Rowen on Facebook and actor Jed Rowen on Instagram.
And I'm on Instagram as This Girl's Life with a Z for the girls, and also recently on TikTok because I stopped watching it.
I'm Kasey Brown on Facebook. That's with a K, and then Kasey Brown 1 on Instagram, I believe. I'm terrible with social media, so.
Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, at Koa Aloha Media, KOAALOAH Media.
I want to thank you, Brian, Kasey, Jed, and Tasha for coming on to the podcast. Have a good day.
Pleasure was all mine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
You're
Anthony.
welcome, and stay safe.
You too.
They're coming to get you, Barbara. This is Carrie.
This is Billy.
This is Mr. Poe.
And we are from A Podcast from an 8. You can catch us every Wednesday wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
Don't forget, you can find Anthony T's Horror Show on social media, over on Facebook, Instagram, and Slasher app at Anthony T's Horror Show, on Twitter at Anthony T's Horror. If you liked this episode, you can subscribe to Anthony T's Horror Show over on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Stitcher. You can also catch Anthony T's Horror Show over on DocDiscussions.com, where you can find my podcast and other podcasts on the Doc Discussions Network. What's Anthony T watching? Well, recently I had a chance to watch what has been one of my most anticipated indie horror films that I've been looking forward to seeing. It's a film called Blind. It's directed by Marcel Waltz. Now, if you don't know Marcel Waltz, he is also the director of Rootwood, which was recently released earlier this year. And definitely check that film out. It's a good film. But his latest film, Blind, is a much better film than Rootwood. They're both two different films. Don't get me wrong. But if I had to compare which of the two films was the best, I would definitely say Blind. The film's screenplay is written by Joe Kettler, who co-wrote the book I, Survivor, the book that was featured in Victor Crowley. Blind stars Sarah French, who's been in such films as Rootwood, Automation, Death House, The Special, Tyler Gillant, who's also in Rootwood, Carolyn Williams, who's in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, and Jed Rowen, who was on the podcast earlier this episode, as he played the film's villain, Pretty Boy. Blind is a very intense and suspenseful horror film. This film is just very good from start to finish. It is literally one of the best films I've seen all year. I know I say it 10 million times, but this is, I think, a real contender to be on the top 10 of 2020 list. One of the reasons why I really liked this film was the fact that Marcel Waltz's direction is just great here. He does a great job building tension with some of the scenes in this film, because some of the scenes in this film kept you on edge. One of the reasons why Waltz does that very well is the fact that he really makes sure that the scenes have a very dark tone to them. It helped that he had a screenplay where there wasn't too many characters to the point where you can have like 5 or 6 characters in the scene. This film may have had that like once in the beginning of the film. And that's it. Because after that, it's like maybe you get 2, maybe 3 characters on screen at a time. Sometimes you get 2, sometimes you get 1 character on screen. But Waltz does a very good job keeping the tension going. Whether it's the way he directs the cast's movement or the way that he makes the action so intense that it helps keep this film's tone very dark throughout. It really made for some very effective, creepy moments in the film. The film also helped that it had a very good screenplay by Joe Kettler. He does a very good job developing his characters. Even though this was probably a difficult screenplay to write, that was because some of the screenplay had to do with dialogue-less scenes. And sometimes it's very tricky to pull off when you're writing a story and you're having your characters just having to move a certain way, especially in the case of the film's villain. Kettler does a very good job keeping the level of dread to the max on this film, because it really provided some really creepy moments. The screenplay also does a very good job focusing on the main character's trauma, as it really made the character interesting and gave the character more depth instead of being just a one-dimensional character, which sometimes these type of films fall into that trap when in the screenwriting process your main character is one-dimensional and is just being stalked by a killer without giving any depth or any reason to care about the character. The main character in Blind is one of those characters that really was very interesting, and also one of those characters that really kept my interest throughout, as this is the type of film where it's really dependent on your main character. If the main character isn't interesting, the film's going to fail. I've seen this earlier this year with Z. I did not like the main character in the film, and it was a supernatural horror film. I didn't care about the character. I felt it was one-dimensional, and that's why Z failed. Blind doesn't, because the character is given a lot of depth, which made the character interesting. It's tough to pull off when you have a film that has to rely on one main character. It is tough, but Joe Kettner's screenplay does it very well. And speaking of performances, I thought Sarah French was excellent in this film. This is probably her best film to date. This is probably her most complex role to date, as well, as she really had to make her character work, and she really does a great job doing that. I like the fact that she gets you invested in her character, as this is a very dark character that she plays, and this film really shows her acting depth, as this is probably her most complex role to date, and definitely her best role to date. As if you're a fan of Sarah French, you have to see this film, as she really pulls off her character very well. The performance is great, and I really hope she gets an opportunity to do more of these complex roles in the future, as she can pull off drama. If the acting, the directing, and the screenplay wasn't enough, this film also has a great score and soundtrack to go along with this film, as it really added to the level of dread and creepiness. As I felt like I was watching at times a giallo film, watching this film. As Blind was a great film. It's probably one of the best independent horror films to be released this year. Definitely check out Blind. It is one of those films that will creep you out all the way to its horrifying conclusion. Remember last episode when I told you that I was thinking of having episode 55 be the last episode of 2020? Well, I changed my mind. I will be doing another episode in 2020. It's another new episode too, so don't worry. It's not going to be another best of. It's going to be a new episode. I haven't got any guests yet for this episode, but I will get a guest for this next episode, as this will definitely be the final episode of 2020, as I've got to start work on the best and worst of 2020 shows, as those shows are usually the most difficult shows to produce all year. It's just that I'm doing an award show type episode with episode 57, so that usually has a lot of problems, so I like to get a jump on the episode as fast as I can, especially this year where the horror whammies is probably going to be dominated by one film. Yeah, I think you know what film I'm talking about. I've complained about this film enough this year. I'll save that for episode 57, but I will be talking about that film on episode 57. That will go nameless, because if I start talking about it, we will be here for the next 10 minutes. So look out for episode 56 before the end of the year. If you enjoyed this episode, I hope you subscribe to Anthony T's Horror Show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Stitcher, along with the YouTube channel as well. Plus, the podcast can be found on Spotify. That's right. Anthony T's Horror Show is now on Spotify. So you can follow Anthony T's Horror Show on the Spotify podcast app as well. With that, I want to thank you for listening to Anthony T's Horror Show. Have a good day, stay safe, and support indie horror.